Scenario. You get a text. You see 4 pages, double spaced. It's whiskey. It's always whiskey. This isn't a surprise or a burden. It's basically a hobby of its own at this point. And it was once my job to professionally recommend whiskey, so if I had a problem with this, it would be my fault. Normally, this is pretty easy because somebody's going to dinner or a bar, and when prices are involved, it's just math. Here's a quiz. I just found this menu on Reddit while I was setting up to record. Take a moment and look at this. What would you pick based off the pricing? Time's up. You start with the John J. Bowman, and if it's a killer barrel, maybe you just stay there. If there's room in your budget, maybe go over to E.H. Taylor's small batch if you're into it, but that's just me. I always prioritize things I haven't tried when the price is right, and sometimes when the price is wrong and I'm feeling dumb. On the list that I received, there were no prices. This is a friend whose boss is going to open up their collection to them, and they sent a list in advance. This is what dreams are made of, people, and it requires a little bit more thought than a simple math equation. So how do you pick whiskey for somebody else? Here's a few ideas and the conclusions I came to. Also, if I look like a sweaty boy, our AC's been out for a little while and I have a massive light staring at me. For anonymity's sake, we'll call him Josh because that's his first name, and this is a picture of his actual face. And if Josh's boss finds this, you should appreciate how much this man cares. I mean, how many people would dive into a hobby like whiskey? Okay, maybe a few of us. Anyways, the first step here is to figure out what you've tried and what you haven't. There are a lot of people in whiskey, mostly on forums and in person, who appreciate sharing loud opinions about products they haven't tried or purchased. Don't be that guy. You don't need to have an opinion on something just because it's popular or it's expensive. Because I'm me, I went a bit over the top and I made a spreadsheet. Was it necessary? Of course not. But I need an inventory list of my whiskey in the future anyways, so this will help us down the road because our collections have a huge amount of crossover. Once you know what you've had, you can eliminate most of the things you haven't. And most of the stuff you can get, plenty of small brands, NDPs, and store picks that aren't going to be necessary for this. And by now, the list you end up with is probably quite small and you can figure out what to do with it. So before I go through my picks for Josh, let's cover some topics of concern. For one, if you're worried about the price or rarity of something, stop. If someone is sharing their collection with you, and especially if somebody sends you a list in advance, they're okay with you trying whatever they sent you. Not to mention, there's no rule saying that you have to share 2-ounce pours of something rare and expensive. A half-ounce or a little baby bottom of a Glen is enough to figure out if you like something or not. You're not doing an in-depth review and you're probably not a critic. I've also found that in both watches and whiskey, collectors tend to keep a few cards close to the chest. You don't need to brag about owning something super rare or expensive to enjoy it, and it creates a way bigger moment when you surprise somebody with a bottle that is exceptional that they did not expect. I also think it's a better idea to figure out questions to ask the person rather than researching and sharing tidbits, especially if you don't actually know a lot about whiskey and you don't know how to vet whether information's correct or not. Just learn enough to ask a few good questions about your picks, and in particular, see what they're excited about. Sometimes the list can tell you what they love, but in this case, I'm seeing someone in the middle of their whiskey journey with a wide collection without a lot of focus. So find out what they're excited about, and that's probably going to be what they want to share the most. People who are just getting into whiskey are sometimes nervous about taking expensive drinks and the imposition because they have no way to return the favor. Usually by the time someone opens up a bottle for you, it's because they want to share an experience with you. It's not about getting something in return, it's about trying to connect over something you're both passionate about. That's enough theory. Here are my picks in the order in which I would ask for them. Starting with Frey Ranch. It is an exciting brand that is hard to find. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I only see their products being distributed in Northern California and Nevada. They're a grain-to-glass operation, which means that they are growing, harvesting, distilling, aging, and bottling everything themselves. They're using a 4-grain mash bill, and it's not terribly old or expensive, but I've heard good things about it, and there's not a way to find it in the Midwest. At 90 proof, it's a really good first pour, but if you only wanted to have 3 drinks as opposed to 5, I'd comfortably drop this for one of my other picks. Quick tip, ordering things based off the proof really only matters if you're going high proof to low proof. So for example, the Weller 12 is a phenomenal pour, unless you've had something else before it. If you've had something like cask strength before you go to Weller 12, it's going to taste like water. Next up, the Knob Creek 12. Even though the 15 is available, most people think that the 12 is kind of the sweet spot. And frankly, for a vast majority of whiskey, 12 is on the high end of the acceptable age spectrum. You have to consider that most whiskey is not going to be great after 15 years. That's not to say that the Knob Creek 15 isn't good, but I think that extra age isn't necessarily worth it here, and I also think it looks good to pick something based off of having a reason for it, and not just picking the oldest thing available. Number 3. Old Grandad 114. Another pour that I'd probably skip if you're picking conservatively, but especially if you're gonna have a cocktail and you're not afraid of a mid-proof whiskey, I think this is a really good transition pour, and as everyone knows, it's the best bang for your buck bourbon on the planet. If you can get it for the $22 it should be. I paid $39 for mine. I'm not angry, I'm just a little disappointed in myself. Probably even worth that, but it's not a price I'd brag about. Calumet 16. I know I'm the guy who just said not to pick the oldest thing because it looks good, and now I'm telling him to pick the oldest thing, but this one's selfish. I can't find Calumet 15 or 16 at a bar for under $35 a pour. And as someone who's a journeyman of whiskey, I'm now finding out how many expensive and old bottles aren't that good. Like I said before, a vast majority of aged whiskey does not hold up after 15 plus years. And if you've had the Elijah Craig 18, you probably know what I'm talking about. I'm not a fan of oak bombs, and that's often what you'll find acceptable at these ages. So I want to know what he thinks. If Josh finds it too oaky, I probably will too. Or if his host stops him and is like, hey, do you like notes of leather, tobacco, and oak? Because that's what this is. I'll know it's not for me. And finally, I'd leave it up to the boss and ask which Weller he thinks is better, 107 or full proof. Everyone has an opinion on Weller. The entire Weller and Blanton's line both make great beacon bourbons. By that, I mean they tell you a lot about the person and where they are in their whiskey journey. Most people get overly excited about both of them before they try them, and then how they feel after they try them tends to guide them on their whiskey journey. So ask the opinion first, see what they suggest. These are two of the Wellers I haven't had. 107 would be my pick personally, but honestly, after trying CYPB and Single Barrel, I don't think I'd pay more than $80 for any Weller product. So I'm not expecting a transformative experience, but if Weller's available, I'm not going to turn it down either. Just because I don't think something's worth $600 doesn't mean I don't think it's good. If you guys made it this far, I will see you next week. Thank you, truly thank you. The positivity and support have made the time and effort that have been put into this channel worth it. If you don't stop, neither will I.